It's recording.
Great. We can lean back a bit, I reckon. Yeah.
Coolness.
Yeah, man.
Okay, this is my really old, awesome friend Ilan Kidron. I've known Ilan since we were little tackers in high school, and we're having a bit of a chat with Ilan today about some theological concepts.
And chasing dreams.
Yeah, and chasing the unicorn dreams in the background. But me and Ilan were having a bit of a chat on Facebook the other day about Moses and about the great gurus of history. And I didn't really know much about Moses, but Ilan is a would you describe yourself as a devoted Jew?
I'm a Jew and I practice some traditions. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm devoted in the sense that I don't practice an orthodox style of Judaism.
No, but
or
you lead ceremonies,
I pick and choose.
Yeah. Yeah, you have your heart in the right place, I think.
That, I hope so. That's
Yeah.
the idea. From what I've gathered from where I am with Judaism, it's about doing good and making good when you can.
Yeah, and Moses was the great rabbi of mythological Judaism. And I wasn't sure if Moses was a real guy or if he was actually a legend. And on the internet, there's information like Wikipedia will say that Moses was actually not a historical character, but then I was looking through the internet and there's some recent videos that there's apparently some people who would debate the historicity of Moses, in that there's evidence in Saudi Arabia of the actual mountain where Moses received the Ten Commandments and where the Israelites crossed the Red
As
Sea.
opposed to the Sinai, or...
Yeah, that it's not the Sinai.
Interesting.
It was a video about the real historical Moses. And this guy went into Saudi Arabia and did some research, but they want to build a city over it, all these ancient sites. There's all these ancient Israelite carvings about, with menorahs and with footprints that are showing that the saying from the Old Testament, wherever the Israelites put their feet becomes their country. And there's like carvings of the foot of someone who was there. And there's all this different evidence that is possibly pointing to the fact that Moses was an actual historical person. What does, from your knowledge, what do you know about whether Moses was real or not?
Well, first of all, I think it's incredible that so many cultures and religions and spiritual school of thought have these gurus to begin with. And why do we prop up these incredibly powerful spiritual teachers and involve our lives in their teachings? I'm a lover of many things spiritual, including the stories of Moses, and the connection I feel with them is a deep one. Although I'm not a historian, the Jews believe Moses to be a Messiah or Mashiach who had access and could communicate with the energy, with God.
Yeah.
And the Jews look at Moses as a savior and a guru. You're right.
Well, guru means a spiritual teacher is a teacher who specifically has a connection to God. So apparently, from what my research I was doing, Moses' connection to God was he could hear God, like when the burning bush spoke to him, and when God gave him the commandments. He was one that could hear God. I think I've got the right prophet.
Yeah,
Right?
no, that's him. That's exactly
Yeah.
him. And you could, I think it was something like the quote is, he could hear the lightning and see the thunder. They flipped it. So it was some sort of synesthetic access that he had. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Could hear the thunder and see the light. No, hear the lightning and see the thunder.
Yeah.
That's a metal lyric for you. It's
Ride
good to
the
be here, by
lightning.
the way. It's lovely to be here. I've had a very interesting couple of weeks with my own spirituality. I broke my foot in the surf, doing some silly things, jumping off very high rocks, something that we used to do as kids.
Yeah.
We used to jump off things and do anyway. I forgot I was 42. I jumped off.
And you landed on a rock?
I landed on a rock, both feet on a rock, snapped my heel, fractured, snapped my left heel, fractured my right something or other. So I'm actually 2 feet
Both feet are out.
are pretty screwed.
I didn't realise that. I thought there was
I landed in the water, realised that I'd done some damage, but not too much damage. I was thankful I still had a spine that was working, and then had to swim round to Bronte. Because I was in between Tamara and Bronte, which are 2 beaches in Sydney.
So you could have drowned
for any
as well.
international people there. So, well, I mean, I was able to swim around. It was Australia Day, so there were like 20, 30,000 people down at Bronte, and I got rescued on a stretcher.
Oh, really?
And I know so many people down there. It was so funny. I'm like waving, hey!
Oh, try that again, Ilan.
Pass me the pethidine. So anyway, ended up in hospital. They were fantastic over there. Since then, I've had a lot of time. I guess why I mentioned I've had a lot of time to meditate. I've just gone on this big cleanse. I'm on the 5th day of a juice cleanse, which has been fantastic. In the meantime, I'd actually experimented a little bit with mushrooms. Did 2 days microdosing on magic mushrooms. Not that had any... I don't think it had any direct physical, spiritual sort of
No
effect.
visionary
And certainly I understand
epiphany.
you come from a very Buddhist background, and I know Buddhists don't take drugs, so I'm aware of that, but this is a conversation, I guess, that I'm going to be honest and tell you where I am. Then after a couple of days of having a very acutely aware, sharp experience on very, very, very little small doses of mushrooms, I felt terrible, a day later or a couple of days later, that saying you're borrowing from tomorrow came into play. I love that one. When you drink or do anything like that, just be aware that you're borrowing from tomorrow. So on the 4th day, I guess you could, I had a downer, and I just decided there was time, to just go on a big cleanse, slow down, read a little, meditate a lot more, and it's just been so rewarding. I've got to say, I feel so nurtured. I feel so well fed. I've been writing so much music, writing kids' music, writing, music for myself, and just, it's been an opportunity just to have this forced stop.
Yeah, well, that's mentioned in Buddhism that solitude or retreat is very much good for the spiritual path. It's good for your soul to have a bit of you time, definitely, especially if you've been injured. And Ilan's basically a awesome local pop star, so he gets like 15,000 people all jumping in big pop concerts.
Doesn't sound too local.
Well, not locally, with the lockout laws, but for Ilan to be able to get some solitude and some retreat time in,
to nourish,
is incredible
and purify a bit,
because he's really an in-demand person.
That's ridiculous. Actually, I'm not in demand, but it's nice. It's nice to have. Thank you. I'll take it. It's nice to just have some time just to relax, and in fact, and have you here, man, to bed. So. Yeah, look, while I've had a couple of very interesting interactions on a spiritual level, on a Jewish level specifically over the last few weeks since doing my foot, my wife, Sam, committed suicide, as you know, Drew, a year and a half ago. I'm not sure if you want to talk about this, but created, and we haven't really had a big talk about it, you know what I mean? I mean, we've had a conversation about it, but it's important, I think we touch on it because it's such an important, imperative part of me now is living through that trauma, finding, you know, my wife hanging and having to raise a child now on my own. I do, however, have loved ones helping me, obviously, and helping us. But finding Sammy and going through this very, very tricky, difficult, tangled, awful time leading up to it, and now being a year and a half later, especially after a year, the grief was very acute, very intense, but it seems something happened after that.
Yeah, mourning period.
The mourning period,
like a year or something to be respected.
Respected and lived through.
Yeah.
But there is a very specific modus operandi of the Jewish way of dealing with grief and dealing with the death of a loved one. In the first week you practice certain things. You surround yourself with people for the first week and put towels on mirrors. You don't hear music, you don't listen to music, you don't drink. You concentrate on grieving. You grieve. And then for the next month, every day you say a prayer and you remind yourself. But it's very important after 1 week of grieving that you get back to work. You go back to work, yeah, and you need to gather pace to be with the universe. The reason why I brought this up, because of this discussion about spirituality in Judaism, is that last week, 2 weeks ago, was a very important week in the Jewish calendar in Australia and the world, where we have a week that's dedicated to people with mental illness and understanding them. This mental illness side of it has come on board in the last decade. It's usually regarding disabilities. So people with disabilities in your community, you dedicate and give a huge amount of charity to it. It's all about charity. Right. So with Judaism, the way that you atone for your sins is through prayer and charity. That's the way that it comes through. Yeah. So anyway, there's a week that's spent on disability that's now become a mental illness awareness. So one of the local synagogues, one that I have very little to do with because they're so orthodox. These are synagogues that have complete segregation of men and women. They have certain things that women aren't allowed to do, certain things that men aren't allowed to do as well. But generally I find it quite a patriarchal type of Judaism that doesn't embrace what I like to embrace in a spirituality, which is the Shakti, which is the effeminate side. And I find... Shekinah maybe, there you go. So anyway, I'm invited to this synagogue to do a big talk about what happened, about how I dealt with grief and how there's such a lack of spiritual foundation in Sydney for dealing with people with mental illness. There's institutes and hospitals that you can go to, but in a sense they're very austere and they're very scary places. And I feel like what's happening in the last few months here, at least within my community, that there is a rising awareness since my tragedy and also a few other recent tragedies, that there's an awareness and there's a desire to build something that will be nurturing, nourishing, purifying, wonderful, beautiful, and creative for people with mental illness. You'll have to excuse the dogs. I've got two lovely dogs and a fly. So it's a place here where all animals are welcome, and a vegetarian house at that.
Well, I had a interesting thing like in the past few weeks, my little sister has been visiting from the States, and also I've been in the past.
Like, and I owe you a congratulations with your sister.
What?
Because she got married.
Oh, that's right.
I'm very happy for you. More family. Sorry, I interrupted.
And anyway, I want to talk a little bit about connections with Judaism and you were talking about there's specific rituals that you're doing in the morning period, and I was watching a video on Kabbalah, the secrets of the Kabbalah, and also the Zohar, which is a book of Kabbalistic mysteries, and one of the rabbis on the video about the Kabbalah was saying that there's all these little mannerisms and specific instructions for how to do the ceremonies and the rituals that they have little things where you'll spill a few drops of wine or you'll do a specific action, and apparently this is to as to kind of appease demons, something like that. And I started thinking about that, and I've been thinking about, like, because of my past, my experience with all different spiritual paths, I've had a bit of experience with demonology, and when I was getting involved with a lot of witches and kind of warlocks and sorcerers at one time in my past, when I was in this band called Order of Chaos, there was a popularity of this, they called her a goddess called Lilith. Yeah. So Lilith is apparently from Middle Eastern roots, from Lilitu, which was like a tree spirit, and she's kind of morphed over the centuries into this demoness that some people call a goddess called Lilith, and so I kind of got the impression that Lilith was all right from these kind of circles that were, there were Satanists involved, there was kind of Antichrist stuff involved, and I didn't really kind of understand too deeply about what was going on. And so at one point I had this dream, this was quite a few years ago, where my little sister was trapped in a tree and she was being eaten by all these ants and she couldn't get out. And then this other guy I know who's called Drugi, which is a similar name to me, like people like Ilan, my old school friends, call me Drew. And this guy called Drugi, who's a guy I know, he's like an occultist. He's very into the occult. He's actually told me that at a later point, when I told him about this experience, he told me that Lilith is his goddess. But in this dream, Drugi gave me a big amulet that was a Lilith amulet. And so I actually went and made it out of wood. I carved it, and it was a woman on a tree like this with her arms up, plus some kind of symbols on the other side. And so I made this carving, and then I had an idea to give it to my little sister for a present. And so I did that, and I also made her a card with different artworks that people have made of Lilith, because Lilith is quite popular in today's world. But then I was reading more about it, and apparently in the more orthodox religious perspective on Lilith, she is a bad demoness, and she can also affect childbirth and something to do with killing children or taking little baby children, and of course I don't know if I should really talk about this, that just recently my little sister did actually lose her child. So I got really freaked out about that in my own way, because I'm a very spiritual person. I see everything from a spiritual perspective, and I thought, when I added two and two together after this, I remembered, oh my God, does Lilith have something to do with bad luck for children? And I researched it, and of course she does. So I ended up buying a Magen David on the internet from Israel and sending it to my little sister to try and avert if I'd accidentally, through my subconscious or something, I'd accidentally cursed her with Lilith. I'd also seen that people who hold a Lilith amulet are going to be sent to hell. I learned all this after I gave it to her, but because she's not actually a believer herself, she's not actually a spiritual person herself, I don't know how to approach the topic and say, can I have that Lilith stuff back? I don't know if I should do that or...
To your sister?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely you should.
You reckon?
Of course.
Like
if that's how you're feeling, I think it's definitely a good idea.
But it's like a present I gave her, and is it giving too much
her
weight to
something
this?
Instead, like change it over for
Yeah,
something.
I did. I sent her the Magen David.
Yeah.
But you know, there's this also the mythology about King Solomon who built the temple by trapping demons into doing the work for him. Have you ever heard of Solomon and the Seal of Solomon?
No, I had no idea that it was about
Grimoires
sealing
of Solomon.
Tell me about it.
Well, this is some of this mythology that's associated with great Jewish mystics and demonology. Like even myself, I've had these visions of all these. It's like in the astral realm, and it's like there's a wall next to me, an invisible wall, and on the other side of the wall, it is filled with all these little grey troll-like, pixie-like demons, all different shapes and sizes.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, like impish, troll head, pixie head, grey demons on the other side of this wall. And I've seen that with my third eye. I've got an active third eye. And you know, and then I started thinking it would be interesting to talk to you about it after I saw on this Kabbalistic video that there is certain offerings given to these ancient demons in Jewish mysticism. And if you put like the Buddhist path, my knowledge from the Buddhist path and all the spiritual paths, that the soul never really dies. So are we in fact stuck with all these basically immortal demons that are never going to disappear, and they just build up behind this invisible wall and try and get us?
It's interesting. I mean, after we talked about Vipassana just before,
Yeah.
and the process of Vipassana is a process by which you shed and you clean off the demons, the dirt that lies thick on your soul.
Well, they call that in Buddhism, you have dust in your wisdom eye.
There you go. And maybe that's what we're speaking about. In fact, you know, these imps is the dust on,
Yeah.
and not to be overly fraught and concerned about them. It's just your own internal demons that come from desire and aversion. You mentioned the Zohar, which is the beautiful book of the Kabbalah. You know what it means? It means, from what I know, it's the rings around the moon, and I think it comes from that because
Radiance.
The radiance of the rings around the moon, and that by the rings around the moon, you can read what sort of day it's going to be tomorrow as well. So it's a predicting force sort of thing as well. It's interesting.
Beautiful.
I'm not well versed in Kabbalah. I've done some Kabbalistic meditations, one of the simplest ones, which I can show you now if you like. And I know what you were talking about was very intense, very deep, and you did go into Lilith and things like this. These are things that that I haven't delved into, and I don't have that sort of access into what feels to me like a very exciting world of demons and spirits. I do know, however, that the Jews, from what I understand, do not believe in hell. There is no hell with Jews. There is...
That's interesting.
Here, and there is...
Like here is Malkuth on the Sephiroth.
That's right, and we're not at the bottom, but we're near the bottom of the growth of the soul, the eternal growth of the soul, where we all end up closer and closer to God, and that in fact we are existing simultaneously. Our souls are existing simultaneously in another realm altogether. For example, the people you are closest with in this life, in this reality, you are actually associating with as well at the same time.
As above, so below.
As above, so below in another reality. You, however, might be my sister or my grandmother or some other force, however it works up there. You wouldn't necessarily be
The same
Drew and
form.
Ilan. No,
Yeah.
no.
Oh, wow.
You were asking, I was about to... An interesting Kabbalistic meditation that I was shown only really recently, as in like last 2 weeks ago at a Sabbath service that we had in Vaucluse at a house called Kesher. It was this. So the first word of one of the most meaningful prayers in Judaism is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And it's the beginning of a prayer that you say, the religious Jews say multiple times a day, but traditionally you say it when you wake up and when you go to sleep. Shema, hear, is the first, to hear. And it's an order. It's not like, can you hear it? Or it's hear, O Israel. It's an announcement. It's you must listen.
Oh, hear, O Israel.
An affirmative in the, hear, O Israel. Hear, O Israel.
Ah.
And it was interesting because we were talking about hearing just before.
Yeah, Moses hearing.
Moses hearing. Hear, O Israel. It's not hear.
No.
It's hear, O Israel, the Lord our God. Listen, the Lord our God, the Lord Israel. Now you take the three sounds of Shema. The first, and you can do it with me. You want to do it?
Sure.
The first is shh. So it's a long immediately when you intone a shh, it harnesses, it brings us all in, it silences, it activates other senses, especially your ears, I guess, but also it can bring you into the moment very quickly. Now the next sound is so we can do that one together. You can feel the association with Om in it as well, right? I mean, and the it's a lovely feeling. It's one we associate as well with feeling yum. It's a positive, aspiring feeling that you get behind the It's almost, it can almost be a sexual thing, but it doesn't have to be. It can be, when a child's it lays in its mother's bosom, it's a mum, and then of course the last syllable, the last sound is and that feels good.
Shema.
So this is broken down, and it's such a big subject and it's an endless topic, but Judaism and the writing of Judaism, the hermeneutics, the numerology, the deep study that works on so many levels also exists within letters themselves. So if you change the in Shema to a nun, it would change the whole meaning of it. Shana, it would mean something completely different, numerologically, sonically, spiritually, on many different levels. Incredible study they do, the rabbinical studies into how the Hebrew language works.
Well, one of my favourite Hebrew words that I know, which is very few, is shamash. Shamash.
What's shamash?
You know, like
we've talked about this before,
with the menorah and the
shumash.
Shumash.
Yeah, the shumash. Yeah.
But it has ancient roots, like it's connected with the ancient Babylonian Shamash, the sun god.
Yes,
all these incredible ancient association.
So for all those who don't know, the menorah, which I have one in my room, it's a beautiful little menorah, is a candelabra that we light on Hanukkah, and the shamash is the candle that we light all the other candles with. Yeah, that's what you're yeah. It's special, beautiful word.
But it's very similar, and I was talking to your dad, Danny, about shamash, and he said shaman is the rain. Shaman, something like that.
Shaman.
Is the rain.
Oh, the rain. Yes. Geshem. And it probably has, again, it borrows some shem at the end of it.
Shem. Oh.
Yeah.
Something
True.
like that. But yeah.
I wish I spoke better Hebrew. But Geshem is rain. Oren, your friend Oren could definitely help you.
Yeah. Well, some of the pronunciation of Hebrew.
He'd probably be giggling. I'm sure he'll watch this. You'll be giggling right now. I love you, buddy. It's been too long.
But an interesting thing I was talking about when that came to mind when you were talking about that there is no hell. In some of my studies of like occult mysteries to do with Kabbalism, that they talk about the tree of life, and that there's a shadow side, the shells side of all the detritus energy of the Sephiroth called the Clippoth or the Clippoth. Have you ever heard of that?
Again, I've heard all these names, but I haven't done too much exploration, and I'm here. I'd love to listen to you.
Well,
I'm here to learn, obviously.
Well, I don't know heaps about it, but it's like the shadow side of the tree of life, and it's supposed to be where all the demons exist. Not on the side of light and the thunderbolt from Godhead that brings the energy to the kingdom, but the shadow side, all the bad stuff exists there. And I found it really, like you're saying, it was kind of exciting and scary, like a horror movie. But if it is actually real, and you have these kind of immortal, indestructible, demonic forces, there's not much you can do about it. It's just.
I think there is. I think it's a subtlety that lives. It can be a subtlety that lives inside ourselves as well. We will always, I think, as normal human beings, have bad inclinations, evil inclinations, whatever you call it, dark inclinations, where you tend to think horrible things of other people or of yourself, whatever you call them, sins. I don't know, but certainly. We've all struggled with them, and we all have these. Yeah,
everyone has their own demons that they're wrestling.
The story of the Exodus of Moses that we reinvigorate every year around the Passover table, around the Seder, is that we recount the story of Moses.
And wasn't that him taking you to the promised land?
That's right. So
I was just listening to a reggae song about the promised land.
Slaves in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, out of Egypt.
I'll just shut that.
No, you can leave it open.
It might the mic's on this, not that good.
Oh yeah, of course. Shut the door. It started pouring down rain. It's beautiful. As soon as we started talking about cleansing and the promised land and evil inclination. Yeah, so you just turn the key the other way, buddy. I'll wait for you to sit back down.
I'll get through this way. Mm-hmm. Has Tracy been cleaning your toenails?
No, I went to a pedi mani for that the other day, and I've got a lot of time on my hands. We were talking about the Seder table, the Passover table. Every year we recount the story of the Exodus in as much detail as we can. It's important that we pass it down to our children and their children's children. What's the purpose of it? And we always discuss it, at least at my family's dinner table, is that it's important that we go through our own exodus. We are slaves to so much. It's important for us to be able to become aware of our own slavery.
Slavery to materialism. This
To
is
materialism.
a great obstacle.
To our own desires, slavery to our own aversions, slavery to our monkey mind, and the importance of at least becoming aware of it. Now, Jews live their history every day. That's the purpose of it. So it's important that we're not reading a story that happened back then. We're experiencing something that's happening now. There's not only an inner exodus, but there's an outer exodus. There's a force within us that has the potential to be released and come out and do good and to serve. Just because you're serving doesn't mean you're a slave. You have inner freedom. It's a harrowing story.
And it's a great metaphor that's been used many times for liberation, isn't it? And liberation of people from oppression.
Liberation from people from oppression through so much suffering, though. I mean, the Egyptians suffered so much. God rained down 10 plagues, killed the firstborn of every family. It's a tale of such imbalance and madness and chaos that inside ourselves, when we go and do Vipassana, we go and meditate, it's like releasing the pus. It's not pleasant, this stuff. You know, it's not meant to be either.
Psychic catharsis.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it.
Well, even like I was telling you about this video I was watching about the historicity.
You watch a lot of stuff, don't you?
Yeah. I'm on
and read a lot.
I'm a bit of a digital junkie.
I just play music most of the time.
Yeah. But they even reckon that the Egyptians were in the crossing of the Red Sea, that the chariots of the Egyptians have since been colonized by corals, and they had footage of on this video.
As in underwater coral?
Yeah, as the wheels and shields and chariots where the metal had dissolved and the shapes of the coral were in the shapes of the chariot wheels, but the metal inside is dissolved, and they tested it for metal residue, and there was metal residue in there. You know, but you know, talking about the battles for liberation and the leftovers of it.
Well, you've been through a lot. I mean, I'm curious to hear. For many, I remember you telling me something, and I might have just heard it wrong, but at some point you were meditating a lot, and you were astral traveling, and I can't remember exactly, astral traveling, leaving and warding off meteors heading to Earth in the future.
Well,
I want to hear more about
form
that.
of gnosis that I was going
What's
through.
gnosis?
Gnosis is experiential, spiritual, received information. You know,
Tell me about all that.
Where you're receiving information through your brain, through your third eye. That is, it's not, no one else has told you about it, but the way that your consciousness is working, it's receiving information from some source. Like Tesla, the great inventor Tesla, talks about a core of knowledge at the center of the universe that he believes exists, and that he was able to make his great breakthrough because he was receiving. You know Tesla?
Yeah, sure.
He was receiving this information from some source.
He felt that way too?
Yeah. Oh. And this is one of the things that he's quoted as saying. And so all through the ages, prophets, mystics have received knowledge from, not told by anyone, not told through any books, just received this knowledge. So at that point I was talking about pyramid mysteries and the mysteries of Horus. Like obviously this is ancient Egyptian mythology. So part of Jewish culture was just talking about with Moses that the ancient Egyptians were the oppressor, but they also have a great spiritual tradition. And I looked into that. I actually went to Egypt before that, sometime before the Arab Spring, which was another, great uprising against oppression and attempt for liberation in the Middle East. But I did an initiation in the pyramids, the initiation of Thoth before the Arab Spring occurred, just before there. And part of this, I was compiling information from all different sources, including my own gnosis, which has received information to progress through this self-initiation. And some of these mysteries I was probably telling you about were connected to the pyramids as containing the Blue Star spaceship. This is written about in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Now, the Blue Star spaceship is the planetary defense system of the ancients for the planet Earth. And this is written about in a book called the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which is great. It gives an alternate history about, Atlantis, Mars, societies on Mars, coming from Mars after Mars was destroyed by these outer space threat called the Serpents of the Deep. Going to Atlantis. Atlantis was then destroyed. Going to build the pyramids all over the world, connected with Thoth the Atlantean. So it's this whole mystical analysis of the ancients that people like Graham Hancock and I think his name is Robert Duvall, different alternative archaeological histories for the human race as a species with amnesia, that we think that, we just evolved recently, but actually we evolved a long time ago and we've forgotten about it. And so these things with harmonizing with the energy of the pyramid and the spirit of Horus, which is like hero, the heroic spiritual energy to do things like, turn the Blue Star planetary defense system to ward off asteroids or ward off intergalactic threats or all this kind of stuff. That's what I was going through. It was like a spiritual revelations.
Did you get far down the rabbit hole there? Did you get?
Yeah, I went all the way down that rabbit hole.
Talk to me. What's down there?
Well, I even went to the point of going into the Great Pyramid. I went into the Great Pyramid.
As in, you travelled there?
No, literally.
Oh, you literally
went inside the Great Pyramid. I made a ritual. I fasted. I did the initiation of Thoth. I lay down in the sarcophagus in the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid with my arms crossed over my chest, and that's when the rabbit hole opened up. It was a cosmic rabbit hole. It was going all the way down to Amentet, the sun at the centre of the earth, and it was going all the way up into the cosmos through Orion's belt, which is the astral gateway through to the other side of the galaxy. So that was the rabbit hole. It was just complete cosmic consciousness.
Is it well travelled? Are there many people that do this? I mean, is it something, what you're talking about? So you experienced this.
Yeah.
You experienced it. And were you aware? Yeah, you were aware of it when it was happening.
Yeah, I was quite aware.
And
I was actually so aware that I had fifth dimensional consciousness. I was able to perceive what was happening in the time stream instinctively. And, for example, when I lay down in the sarcophagus, the whole throne room was empty. I could feel with my intuition that people were coming, and it was illegal to do this process at that time. So I got up out of it.
In Egypt, you weren't allowed to do it?
No.
Or in the spirit realm, you weren't allowed to do it?
For real.
In Egypt.
And the guards were coming up, and I quickly got out before they arrived.
So the guards were called when there was something...
No one knew.
Spiritually suspicious.
I did it in the dark, like in the time stream, in a little loophole in the time stream, because I was so aware at that point. you know.
Were you with anyone or you were travelling alone?
No, I was by myself.
Amazing. That's heroic.
Well,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so wait, another question. That's incredible that you experienced that. Was that something that you were able to then, did you gain any knowledge? Were you able to then take back something out of that experience and be able to do that sort of thing at will? Were you able to harness that fifth dimensional aspect or whatever you say? Like, is that something that...
Yeah, it helped me with things like tarot cards, or, you know, which is also to do with telling the future. And but as you know, I was called Aros at that time. That was my initiated name, Aros, from Andrew Ross. So Aros and Horus are almost analogous. So it was on lots of different levels, my connections there in Egypt. But even when you hear in Jewish mysticism, you know, the Lord has taken me out of Egypt with a strong hand. I safely made it there. I went through all this in the pyramid, you know. I was a step ahead the whole way. I got out and just after that, there was an incredibly violent revolution, the Arab Spring, which I was also one step ahead of.
Oh, you got out just in time? Is that what
I got out before then. I got out a good couple of months before shit hit the fan, basically. But I was a step ahead the whole way, you know. And even channeling the name Aros, that was received knowledge through my Druidic initiation. Yes. So you know.
What an amazing experience. I mean, I'm trying to think of my own sort of spiritual experiences like that, and I've never been one to be able to visualize things very strongly. I don't have that in me. I can interpret what's going on and create something out of that, an artwork, a piece of music, but actually to go beyond your dreams. And I have my own shortcomings. Obviously, we all have our shortcomings with spiritual journeys. Your access and your experiences sound very real, you know, something that not a lot of people might get the opportunity to experience. And there's a part of me that craves that, and that's the wrong way to go about it, I guess. You know, I'm happy with the person I am. However, I've never astral traveled, and I've done it in other ways. I've communicated with spirits on other levels. When my wife died, for example, kookaburras started gathering around me everywhere I went. It was very beautiful, you know.
You've got to see the synchronicities, right?
Exactly.
And I'd go so far with the synchronicities, the connections, that my initiated name was actually Chaos Chronos, as in Chronos. You know, I'd connected with synchronicity so much that I'd actually connected with Chronos. So Chronos is like an ancient Greek god. So why am I getting on this level? Probably, I assume it's because I'm actually like a mystic. And a mystic means someone who has direct experience of God or of the divine. So that's how I see it.
I wish I could have entered the experience with Sammy in her mental illness. I think that's what, to come full circle from how we started, is that I think there's a lack of trying to enter that experience from the health community, from the wider community. In ancient times, when people used to gather around the fire, the witch or the shaman, or indeed the madman, would come around the fire and tell a story and laugh crazily, and people would laugh with them and enter the experience of the crazy wisdom. Now, I've got to be honest, like when we were at school and you were going through all of this and after school, we thought you were completely off your rocker. But now we speak about it and I've got a completely different appreciation for you and your journey. And I have for many years now understood that when I'm with you, it's actually the closest thing to reality that I can be with, is actually being with you. Is that you have an awareness and that you're there. And I'm very thankful for your friendship.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Very, very thankful. very thankful. More than you probably think.
Yeah, well, you're probably my best friend ever.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, look, we're entering the experience together, and I think that it's time for an awakening for everyone to keep trying to enter the experience with each other and blessing each other, and there are no answers to what I've been through. I try and look for them all the time. All I can do is ask more and more questions as to what happened, and that can give you comfort as well. Not having answers, sometimes you need to leave them there and try and enter the experience as opposed to trying to have things that are definitive. What you were talking about with the devils and the demons.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a matter of allowing them to just be there, accept them, and they too will pass.
Yeah. Well, we can hope and pray, can't we? That's all we can really do, and look forward to a better day when everyone is liberated, when everyone is compassionate, and when everyone can be honoured as an individual. I think that's really important. Legend, bro. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for coming on my YouTube
Thanks,
video,
Aros. Thanks,
buddy.
Drew. Chaos Crawlers.